What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition Power Gamers Tactics Room. I'm your host, Bill Braun Bafflestone. So today, we are having the second part of my 3-part Psi Warrior series, embedded in my larger 28-part Fighter series. And yesterday, we looked at the Psi Warrior from a review and ratings perspective to get an overview. Today, we are going to do a deep dive looking for optimization leverage points. And then tomorrow, I will be putting it all together with a level 1 through 20 character build. So let's take a look at these powers and see what we can optimize. So first, I wanted to look at the Psi Warrior power progression. I've put a chart on the screen that shows how many uses of their powers they get per day relative to Battle Masters, Rune Knights, and Arcane Archers. And we have to remember that the Psi Warrior is the archetype that gains the least benefit from short rests relative to any of the other comparable power suites. So the fewer short rests you get in your campaign, the better the Psi Warrior looks. They are better than Battle Masters, using the Battle Master as a standard with 0 short rests, and they are worse than Battle Masters with 3 or more short rests per day. So this is going to be totally campaign dependent. How many short rests you take per day is wildly variable from table to table. The game, however, is calibrated for 2 short rests per day. So if we assume 2 short rests per day, we see that the Psi Warrior is slightly inferior to the Battle Master progression at levels 3 through 8. It's approximately equivalent to the Battle Master progression from levels 9 through 12, and it is superior to the Battle Master progression once you reach level 13. However, most games are under level 10, something like 95% of games. So unless you are taking this Psi Warrior into the higher levels, it doesn't quite hold up to the Battle Master as a standard, particularly if you have more than 2 short rests per day. Do note that the Psi Warrior gets big power bumps at level 15 and 18, because these new powers are 1-minute duration and very high impact. So again, Psi Warrior looking good at higher levels, but you'll be lucky if your campaign ever gets to that point. So now let's look at the powers themselves. Their first 3rd level power is Protective Field. Use a psionic energy die and your reaction to reduce damage taken by the die roll plus your intelligence to either yourself or an ally that you can see within 30 feet. So this is a significant boost to hit point defense, particularly in Tier 1 and 2. So while this class is somewhat multi-attribute dependent and they may not have the best con, this will help keep their hit points competitive. It's excellent for managing concentration, including for allies. Remember, you don't have to use this on yourself. So you can use it to remove the need for a concentration check by bringing damage to 0. But that said, you don't necessarily need to remove all the damage, and you can also manage concentration checks by using this power to stay under the threshold necessary to keep the save DC at 10. Now, this is most optimal for using to support your party casters, because the Psi Warrior has no concentration options themselves from base class abilities before 18th level. Now, that said, you can acquire them via feats, items, or dips, but these are pretty high investment relative to just working with your party, though it may be worth it for an obscurement option if you are playing from range. By that I mean, if you end up playing a character that works well from obscurement, it might be worth taking a low-level dip to get a concentration obscurement option like Fog Cloud or something. Note that it is also excellent for managing effects that end with sufficient damage, for example, Armor of Agathis or Motivational Speech, although again, you cannot leverage these abilities from your fighter class abilities. You will have to dip or something. So overall, I like this power a lot. I rate it good relative to the other limited use powers like those available to the Battle Master or the Rune Knight. And as a defensive oriented player, I'm happy to go in with a little force field. The next power gained by Psi Warriors at 3rd level is Psionic Strike. Once per turn, you can use a psionic energy die and a free action to add extra force damage equal to the die roll plus your intelligence to any weapon attack within 30 feet of the target, which is nothing fancy. This is the least impressive ability, but it is a thematic offensive option. The extra damage is pretty solid impact at lower levels. though it does scale unimpressively with level as the psionic energy die increases. You can only use it once on each of your turns, and it is applied after the hit. So pretty good efficiency. You're not going to be wasting your psionic energy dice. The range limit is annoying for archery, although archery is still an excellent option, which synergizes with the other class abilities. That range limit is kind of a downer. Also, check with the DM to see if it will do damage on a critical or extra damage, because rules as written, it's applied immediately after dealing damage. So that's kind of ambiguous. However, the fact that the additional damage is force damage does imply to me that it's separate from the weapon damage, despite the flavor text that says you can propel your weapons with psionic force. If that were actually how it were playing out, then your weapon would just do additional slashing damage or whatever. So figure that out, but if it is considered separate from the critical, then it should trigger multi-attack bumps from abilities or effects like Hex or Spirit Shroud. So definitely talk to the DM and get it figured out how exactly it works. But regardless, this is a pretty boring power. I'm not too impressed. I give it a rating of poor. The last power they get at 3rd level is Telekinetic Movement. Once per day, or can use a psionic energy die and an action to move an object or willing creature up to 30 feet. Can't affect yourself. The creature must be large or smaller, and the tiny object can be moved to or from the hand. So this requires your action, so when you use it, it's going to have to be a dramatic and impactful use. It is excellent for managing your front line from range. You can reposition your allies from suboptimal positions without incurring an opportunity attack, although you cannot use this to break allies out of grapple, as the target must be loose. It can also take allies out of harmful area of effects that proc at the start of their turn, for example, Cloud Kill. There's several spells that work that way. And you can circumvent environmental obstacles not only in combat, but also in the exploration phase. You come across a chasm and you can't get across it, the Psi Warrior can just kind of shoot people across. Also nice synergy with equipment. You have to place ball bearings, caltrips, oil, inhaled poisons and such, so this can be good for that. Also nice synergy with drop abilities, like the Disarm Maneuver, Command, or Fear. You get them to drop something and then immediately flip their Staff of Power or whatever into your hand. That can be a pretty cool move. Also great synergy for the Bag of Holding bomb if you're really cheesing it up. If you're not aware, if you put a Bag of Holding into another Bag of Holding, depending on how the DM interprets it, it's gonna blow up and with no save, suck everything within 10 feet to another plane of existence. So that can be fun, and this ability can help make that happen. And finally, check with your DM to see if maybe you can ready your action to use this power, and if an enemy shoots an arrow or throws a weapon or something, then you can just immediately suck it into your hand safely. That would be really cool, but not technically possible. Rules as written, it's definitely something that you're going to have to check with your DM to see if you can pull that off. So overall, pretty decent power. I give it a rating of average. At 7th level, we add a couple of new powers, starting with Psi-Powered Leap. Once per short rest, or a psionic energy die plus your bonus action to gain a fly speed equal to twice your move until the end of the current turn. So a 1-turn fly speed at double movement is an excellent maneuverability option. Now keep in mind, it ends at the end of your current turn, so you can't stay aloft, and be careful about falling at the end of your turn. But this can result in tremendous bursts of speed because it enhances your base move, which means it stacks with enhanced movement, like your dash, action surge, expeditious retreat, haste, right? All of those are going to increase your base move, which is going to make you really fast. That means you're going to be excellent at kiting, you're going to be excellent at taking advantage of cover, and it's interesting to bump this up with certain things, like the Tabaxi Feline Agility power that can double their base move. So now you're moving at 120 feet before dashing, and also interesting with the mobile feat and or enhanced move races like the Centaur or the Satyr. You can get that base move up, then your Psi-Powered Leap is going to be really long. Now, if you really want to take advantage of this, you can create tremendous fall damage by grappling with your enemy and then flying with them into the air, or jumping with them into the air. If you can fly at super high speeds, you can achieve significant height even at half speed because you're grappling somebody. And note that with an action surge dash, you can double your move for one round, so even an unenhanced Psi Warrior can dash 120 feet and retain an action to grapple. Now note, you can only take up to a third of your move speed if you want to avoid falling damage yourself. For example, if your move is 120 feet, you can take them up 40 feet with your 80-foot move because it costs double. And then once you let them go and force them to fall and take 46 falling damage, you still have 40 feet of movement left and you can safely return to the ground. Or if you really want to get crazy, you can combo it with the Monk Slow Fall ability, or even a Feather Fall spell, maybe out of a Ring of Spell Storing or something, and that way you could leap up the entire 60 feet, drop them, and then not have to worry about taking falling damage yourself. That, I think, is pretty interesting. I might try and work that into my own character build that I'm going to put out tomorrow. So overall, I really like Psi-Powered Leap. I love any kind of enhanced maneuverability option, and this is a really sweet one, so I give it a rating of good. Next, we have the Telekinetic Thrust, which enhances your Psionic Strike such that it also forces a strength save versus prone or a 10-foot push. So it's great that Telekinetic Thrust is not a standalone power, but is combined with Psionic Strike, especially since Psionic Strike was a little underwhelming, and so now you can do damage and create an effect. And this is another elite party support option, just like the Protective Field, because prone and push are excellent party combo options. Prone gains melee allies' attacks at advantage, and those allies can grapple them to keep them down. Now, the flip side of that is that prone is bad for archery, either from yourself if you're an archer or your allied archers. And the push optimizes casters' persistent area of effects. So they throw up a web, an entangle, a sleet storm, a stinking cloud, a cloud kill. I mean, tons of persistent AoE in this game, and you can push people into it. You can also use this ability to create disengages and break grapples for your melee allies. So I really like Telekinetic Thrust, and I give it a rating of good. Next, we have Guarded Mind, resistance to psychic damage, and a psionic energy die to end charmed or frightened on self. As a defensive-oriented player, I really like this, especially considering that fighter wisdom saves are bad. So you will probably get charmed or frightened quite a bit in this game, and having essentially an immunity to it is an excellent defense. Now, for synergy purposes, you want to avoid races with bonuses against charm or frighten, because those are redundant. So no elves, no Githzeri. And it is annoying that you have to use an action to get rid of the charmed or frightened condition, but that said, I'll take it. I still like Guarded Mind, but really not much to optimize with it. It's a passive defense. Next, we have Bulwark of Force. Once a day, or use a psionic energy die and your bonus action to confer half cover to yourself and allies, up to a number of allies equal to your intelligence modifier, and they have to be within 30 feet, and it lasts for 1 minute. So an amazing defense that lasts for the full battle, and you can use it as many times as you need to because you can trigger it with a psionic energy die. +2 AC and +2 deck saves is just fantastic in bounded accuracy. However, it is half cover, so it won't stack with actual cover. And keep in mind that there are certain feats and abilities that can ignore cover, such as Sharpshooter or the Arcane Archer Seeking Arrow. Now, the range requirement is bothersome. If you are playing a ranged character, you're going to need to get up close to be able to protect your allies. But don't overthink it. This is an awesome power, and it should always be your first bonus action. So at 18th level, they get Telekinetic Master. Once per day, or a psionic energy die to cast Telekinesis, and get a bonus action weapon attack every turn while concentrating on telekinesis, including the turn that you cast it. So, folks, telekinesis has a 10-minute duration, and they can do this like 14 plus times a day. That's fantastic. They are going to be able to keep this going a lot. So, a fantastic control option. Keep in mind it will clog your concentration, but again, you don't have any such abilities in the fighter or archetype suite. And it works well with prone from the Telekinetic Thrust to keep them down. Although, check with the DM about the ambiguous wording of restrained, because it doesn't say that it implies the restrained condition. It might just be flavor text, but if it does impart the restrained condition, then you don't need prone, because restrained by itself gives attacks at advantage. So those are my thoughts on the powers. A few final comments as a general overview. I feel like the Psi Warrior is suited for either tanking or archery. Archery is somewhat problematic due to the range of some powers, but I do think that there are some benefits to hanging in the back and exercising control over the party's position and stuff. The build does rely on intelligence, so you are going to have some multi-attribute dependent issues. You should have at least a 14 intelligence to start, and ideally 16. So I'm thinking a dex-based build is going to be appropriate here. The psychic feats are intriguing. There is some synergy there, particularly telekinetic. That uses a bonus action, so isn't going to be an issue for most of your career, although it may cause clog issues once you get to 18th level and are just keeping telekinesis online all the time. But the Psi Warrior is a fantastic party member with multiple abilities that can protect or otherwise aid colleagues. So I'm seeing the optimal playstyle as a type of support character while pumping out mid-level DPR. I don't necessarily think you need to invest in really crushing it on damage. Do note that most of the abilities that affect allies or enemies require sight, so either avoid heavy obscurement or add blind fighting to leverage it. There is some resonance with a wizard or artificer dip, or as a dip, due to the intelligence synergy and protective field helping manage concentration, and a bit of resonance with the monk dip due to enhanced maneuverability options. I already mentioned that slow fall might be an interesting thing to work into the Psionic Warrior's abilities, but remember that Psionic Strike won't work with unarmed attacks unless they're natural weapons, because the text specifies that it only applies to weapon attacks. And unlike the Rune Knight, the Psi Warrior suffers from no early clog, as the suite offers only one reaction, albeit an excellent one, and requires no bonus actions yet. It does add Psi-Powered Leap as a bonus action at 7th level, and it starts to clog up at 15th and 18th level once you gain 2 more abilities that require bonus actions. But for most of your playing career, you're going to be fine. So that's it. That's my deep dive of the Psi Warrior powers, and it's giving me a sense of how I want to build this character for my next video. Please let me know in the comments, however, if you can think of any other ways to optimize these powers, because the Psi Warrior is pretty new, and I actually wasn't able to find much out there as I was doing my research on it. So most of these I had to self-generate, and as someone who has never played a fighter before, I feel like I probably missed a couple of ways to use these powers. So please, help a brother out and give me some input before I make my character build tomorrow. In any case, thank you so much for watching. This has been the Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition Power Gamers Tactics Room. I'm your host, Bill Brian Bafflestone. Please tune in tomorrow for my character build series where I finish off my look at the Psi Warrior, and I'll see you next time.